Welcome to another episode of the Launch Notes podcast. I'm Blake Thorne from Launch Notes. Really thrilled to be joined today by Dave Meyer, who is a head of product at Atlassian, working on their enterprise cloud offering. Dave's had a really incredible run at Atlassian. He's quickly climbed up the ranks in the product org, worked on a bunch of interesting teams and projects there. Really excited to dive into this one. Dave, welcome to the Launch Notes podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Blake. Good to talk to you.
I'd love to. I know you've had a lot of cool experiences at Atlassian and been on different teams and kind of, quickly, I was just looking at your LinkedIn. It seems like you've touched a little bit of everything on the product org over there, which is super exciting. Maybe just give us like the kind of quick background of like how you got started in this type of work in the first place, like what got you interested and kind of how you ended up in this whole world.
Oh man, I probably starting at the top and coming up on 11 years full time at Atlassian, and got my Atlassian gives you a bobblehead.
Yeah, I was gonna say your bobblehead status.
Anniversary. So I got my bobblehead behind me.
Nice.
I started as a product marketing intern before I even finished college at Atlassian, and then I started full time 2 days after I graduated, and have not found a reason to leave yet. And so I joined Atlassian. My first job, product marketing intern. YouTube was a new thing at the time, or at least getting company content onto corporate content onto YouTube. And so my first job was figuring out this whole thing of YouTube SEO and figuring out how to get Atlassian's company YouTube videos ranking higher in search results. And I've had a long and illustrious career since then. I started full-time in a product marketing semi-developer relations role. I was hired right as we launched the Atlassian Marketplace, which is effectively our app store for extensions, integrations for all of Atlassian products. And, it was a new initiative, gave me tons of opportunity to explore and experiment and, kind of hybrid role of, helping our customers find and discover awesome new apps for Jira and Confluence, and then also finding developers to come build more and more apps. And so, like I said, semi-developer relations. And one of the things that was awesome, because even though it's a marketing type role, a lot of the traditional marketing activities don't necessarily apply. Like you're not going to go run performance marketing Google ads for individual apps on your store as the platform provider, right? And so, I spent a lot more of my time, figuring out how do we do collections and how do we surface categories of apps on our marketplace. And those were effectively, when it came down to it, product improvements for our marketplace site. And then on top of understanding all of these different apps and how they added value to Atlassian's products, helped me kind of think and go into a lot of detail about like what is the value of the products that we're trying to provide. These developers realize how valuable these products are, and then add more value on top of it. And that was really compelling to me. Ultimately, it piqued my interest in moving into product management. And I think, at the end of the day, I wanted to be as close as possible to creating that value for customers and solving customer problems. Like that's what got me excited and, continues to, motivate me to this day.
Nice. So, and you kind of went product management and never looked back. It looks like you have had various experiences across the product org since then.
I kind of started moving to product management, and then ultimately realized, Atlassian back in 2014 was a much smaller company than it was already a 10-year-old company, but a much smaller company than it is today.
Definitely.
And so at the time I was based in our San Francisco office, and I realized, if I want to be around the best of the best, Atlassian's top product managers, its top engineers, top designers, and no disrespect to the amazing folks that were in San Francisco at that time. But 90% of our R&D at the time was in Sydney, and so the best place for me to go to accelerate was in Sydney. So I joined the Jira team as a product manager, moved to Australia, and kind of went on
Nice.
from there, worked on Jira for 4 years across admin, ecosystem, a lot of our core platform for Jira, and then came back to the US based out of our Mountain View office, and we were launching a new product that was more targeted towards enterprise security, single sign-on, directory syncing, that sort of thing, called Atlassian Access. So I helped launch the Atlassian Access product and led that for a year, and then it was kind of seamless transition from Atlassian Access to launching premium editions for Jira Software, Jira Service Management, Confluence, and then ultimately our enterprise of the products. And so got our premium and enterprise plans, Atlassian Access, and then kind of a broader portfolio, basically our enterprise cloud platform today across free functionality, our admin experience and our admin console, and then a lot of the most foundational investments we're making in, enterprise data management, compliance, boxes, the really sexy stuff.
Yeah. All right. So much to dive into here. But what I love about, all this experience is you've touched some pretty important parts of the business that like folks might not typically, like for an outsider, they think, product at Atlassian, it's like, oh, it's Jira, it's, it's maybe Confluence or Trello or whatever. But it's like, there are these, areas of the business, like the marketplace and like the enterprise functionality, where it's like, it itself is it's got its own strategy and its own team and stuff like that. And it might not be like the first sort of like SKU that you think of as a customer, but it's like a very important part of the business. And I think there's, that's not often like as front and center in product conversations, but as critical for sure. And interesting stuff to work on.
There's this anecdote story that I assume it's true. But don't quote me on dates or people. But there's a guy who was on our board of directors at Atlassian for a really long time named Jay Parikh. And from what I've heard, there was a conversation that happened years ago as Atlassian was first starting to invest in building a platform, kind of shared components across all of our different products. And Jay is at Facebook, and he was talking about, Facebook had probably Facebook.com and Instagram and a bunch of individual things that are extensions of Facebook. And they're saying, and he told Mike and Scott, Atlassian's co-founder, co-CEOs, that he told them that actually 80% of Facebook's engineering and R&D was in the platform, and only 20% of Facebook's product people were actually working on things that are products as customers experience them. And that was a light bulb moment for Atlassian, where we probably had kind of the inverse of that ratio, and a big story of and we're not at the point where 80% of our R&D is on platform today, but we've definitely come a lot closer towards that ratio than we were previously, where more than half at least of our R&D capacity is going towards kind of those things that are either under the surface or shared, and that creates consistency for customers as they move from one product to another. It creates efficiency and leverage for us, where we can build one version of a text editor, one version of how to do app mentions, and then it also allows us to create entirely kind of new experiences that wouldn't be possible if we were just creating these products in independent silos, because we can do something like show you someone's profile, and hey, what have they worked on recently, and it can span the Confluence pages that they've commented on, and then a Jira ticket that they updated, and then a Bitbucket pull request that they submitted, and we can show it to you all in one list nice and easily. That's super interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of benefits around, as you move into like product discovery on like new products or other areas the business wants to explore, where it's like, cool, we don't have to like rebuild, app mentions or whatever from the ground up. Like we've got that. So like we can add new things without, right. That's a key part of Atlassian's kind of secret sauce as we think about expanding our portfolio is, exactly. Like how can we make it easier for us to, identify those new use cases and bring the product to market sooner? And it's really, it becomes like, I think it's kind of intuitively obvious at the things like the infrastructure level. It's like, yeah, all right, we've got an internal platform as a service to simplify like development components. And oh yeah, we should probably have like design consistency across the products, make it look and feel the same way.
Yeah.
And then, there's the things that the customers experience, like, I have a consistent text editor across the different products, right? But then where I worked today, which is really in like the enterprise platform part of our business, we apply those same principles, right? And so we just launched a product called Jira Work Management and another product called Atlas. And with both of those products, right, like we have key requirements that are really focused on our larger, our enterprise customers, like, single sign-on, data residency, right? And you can build those deeper into the stack and into the platform so that, from the day we launch Atlas, because they're using our Atlassian shared identity and shared login, they automatically, if you're using that login is covered by single sign-on. So if you're a company and you've paid for Atlassian Access and you've got single sign-on set up, you can add Atlas and like you don't have to get like a special plan or turn on single sign-on for Atlas separately. It's just out of the box, already there and already running.
Yeah. No, that's such a critical component to like what makes, the business successful and flexible, especially at the scale it's at. And it's really, that's super interesting. I want to back up in time a little bit. I want to talk about Marketplace. I think Marketplace is so interesting. A lot of folks might not, and I didn't realize it when I joined Atlassian. It was like, there's a marketplace. There's like all these other, and like you go to like the user conference, there's all these marketplace vendors there. There's like this massive ecosystem and all this like economic value being generated with these like marketplace vendors. Like, and I had no idea until I saw it for myself. But I'd love to hear about, how do you think about like kind of bringing something like that to market? Because it's so much more unique than like, hey, we've got another product or something. It's like a whole ecosystem, and it's a whole kind of two-sided marketplace. And, like, how do you, like, what goes into like launching something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I've certainly, I joined the week I joined Atlassian the week we launched the Atlassian Marketplace. So I definitely had, some of my fingers on the initial early development of the marketplace, but I definitely can't take credit for the idea. Shout out to one of my early bosses, a guy named Dan Franz, who is actually a marketplace partner for Atlassian today. But before that, he actually, helped develop and build the V1 of the marketplace. Yeah. And really where it started for Atlassian, like I wouldn't recommend to any startup, like go build a marketplace. Right. The starting point is have a product where there's, that is extensible and is easy to extend and invest in developer relations and extensibility. And then, but that's not enough. You need to be able to create economic opportunity too. And so it's not just, you can integrate and grab our data, but you can't, do any, like the thing that Atlassian really got right, going back to, I think we launched our first plugin framework for our on-prem products in 2007. So, within 4 years of Jira coming to market, and then it was another 5 years before we launched the marketplace, right? And the thing that we really got right was we offered a ton of extensibility and a ton of customization. And so apps could go really deep and create, really big, new, compelling features and additional investment. It's not just like, you can hit our API and pull the data out. It was like, you can build an app that really transforms or extends or adds something significant and new to the product in some way. That if you look back 15 years, the original version of boards and backlogs, like things that are kind of considered core functionality of Jira software today, was implemented first as an extension of the basic issue tracking functionality, right? And so when we launched the marketplace, we already had a library, a pretty thriving developer ecosystem, and apps that were already, kind of budding successful businesses, right? Like we had apps that were being sold commercially already. And so the thesis of the marketplace was, all right, if we had a kind of app directory, right, where like to help customers find new apps, right? But then the thesis of the marketplace is basically, hey, if we invest a whole lot in simplifying that discovery process on version management and installing and updating the apps and have that in a consistent, standardized way, and then we pick up a lot of the load of commercial licensing and transactions, right? And saying, all right, we're going to have a standard license agreement. You're going to buy all the apps through Atlassian. They're going to be on the same invoice that your Atlassian products are on. You're not going to have to go engage with each app developer separately. Then, that's a win-win, right? Where like the app volumes are going to increase significantly, and customers are going to find more value from the products. And so, and Atlassian's going to be able to create a new business line and, all those things. And so my first challenge, actually, I think back to the first year of my career, right, was to convince some of our early app development partners to move commercial licensing billing system to Atlassian's marketplace, and the upside of doing that for their business. And then along the way, we were also figuring out how to unleash the potential of the marketplace itself and find creative ways to surface potential apps to our customers. And so we already knew the demand was there. We already knew the supply was there. It was just a matter of trying to, I think, see where the friction points were between customers wanting our products to do more and app developers trying to create new problems. Sorry, I know I've already talked a lot.
That's the idea.
one other kind of competitive advantage that it made Atlassian's developer marketplace successful was our channel distribution model, which kind of looking big picture at Atlassian's business, Atlassian's always had a philosophy around, today it's called product-led growth, but basically seller software with low friction and, avoid high-cost salespeople to the greatest extent possible, and, maintain our products that easy to try, easy to buy. And as part of that, especially in our early days, I mean, it's still true today, but like particularly, 12 to 15 years ago, we really relied on our channel sellers to do a lot of those value-added services and value-added selling to our enterprise customers. And so then when it came to creating like an ecosystem of apps and extensions for our products, the biggest source of apps in those early days wasn't like, oh, I'm going to come in and try to figure out what Jira customers want and then build an app for it and see if it works. It was these partners who are already working hands-on with Atlassian customers, and that one enterprise customer would say, "Hey, I need an extension or an app that does adds this function or does this or integrates with this other system," and then the partner could kind of say, all right, great, I'm going to build that for you. And then I've got all this IP and this technology and know-how. I bet there's a bunch of other enterprise customers that are also going to want this. And the marketplace made it easy for them to kind of take that initial investment and then, get a lot more leverage out of it.
Oh, that's so smart too, because the way that conversation typically goes, it's some like account executive inside the company and the customer's going like, everything looks great, but man, I really need like time tracking on this too. And then the sales rep's like, yeah, I can ask. It's on the roadmap. We might revisit it. And then the customer, the prospect kind of gets cold and blah, blah, blah. But what you just described is someone who's, having that conversation is also empowered to build on the platform. And they go, cool, actually, I could build that for you, for this customer, for this use case. And yeah, there might even be more people out there who want this too. And then the conversation doesn't stall out. It actually, the functionality develops on the spot because of that. And, Atlassian really just doesn't have to do a thing either. Like just you've empowered the channel partner and to do that. That's so awesome.
Yeah. It's when I'm sure somebody out there, I'll give credit to Mike and Scott. I'm sure they had this great plan all along, but it's definitely, reduces a lot of the risk on all sides of the economic equation.
For sure. And it's such a, I'm sure for the product teams there, it's such a smart thing to do, and it can be such a valuable resource. And for one, it allows all this, like the bigger you get, all this kind of like these niche interests pop up. And if you're not careful, some like niche functionality can kind of corner your product team. And it's like, we kind of got to build this for this big customer. We kind of got to, do this because 4 people are making a lot of noise about it. I was
right. And it's really tempting. Yeah. And I see this today to kind of say, okay, well, let's take all those, niche feature requests that we get and, say, oh, those are the things we're not going to do. And then go tell some app developers to go build those features instead. And, I'm a little bit skeptical of that approach. I think it's really important, whether you're an Atlassian sized company or, a much, in a much more nascent state to invest in, creating a generically extensible platform, having spent and then just letting the, without sounding like an Uber capitalist, letting the market decide like what are the most compelling opportunities. Like humans are amazing, and they're really good at figuring out what customers want if there's an economic interest behind it. And so, don't say like we're going to take all the big opportunities and leave all the like small little crumbs for our ecosystem. Right. You create, and having spent going from working on the marketplace team to I spent 4 years on the Jira team, and one of the engineering teams I was product manager for on Jira was our extensibility team. So I went from the marketplace service to building actual APIs and plugin points for Jira itself. And when I look back at that time, like the things that the most successful things that we did were the ones where we probably had the least idea exactly how it was going to be used, or we had an idea, but then built it in a generic enough way that it created, like there were 100 more use cases that we didn't anticipate, right? Like those are like, that's the ideal state for a kind of platform component.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to ask you too, I mean, for folks out there who are considering whether it's on Atlassian or some other, like a lot of big, the big kind of software platforms have some version of like an ecosystem or marketplace or app directory now. Like if I'm out there, if I'm a startup or, an entrepreneur thinking of building something for one of these marketplaces, or I've got a company and I think I could, do something with a marketplace app for, Atlassian or someone, like what are some ways that I could make sure my app gets noticed or stand out or, work with the kind of the larger company to actually make sure people actually find my app? Because I think that's something folks struggle with too, is just like, they assume like, oh, it'll be on Atlassian's app directory, so everyone will find it. At this point, it's kind of like saying like, it'll be on Apple's app store, so people will find it. It's like, but there are ways I've seen that folks can kind of like stand out and, but what have you seen people do to be successful, I guess, on these platforms?
Yeah, it's funny. Like in the very early days of my career, like that was, the conversation that I was having on a daily or weekly basis. Right. I think I gave, if you really dive into my, my history, like I'm sure I probably gave a talk at Atlassian's developer conference on this topic. At a high level, I think the thing that really probably two things set the most successful new entrants in the marketplace apart are, one, thinking about especially for folks that didn't necessarily have like an independent startup, but they kind of came in and said like, I'm going to build an app on top of Atlassian ecosystem. So, but the ones that were successful really thought about the whole end-to-end business, right? Like they thought about it like, so it's not just, I know that Jira really could use an extension that does blah, and I'm going to build that, right? They got the product, right? But they also got the onboarding experience right. They got the branding right. They got the marketing right and the pitch to customers right. Like they had great looking profiles with a nice brand. And when you click the link to the documentation and to the vendor's website, like there was actually something there, right? Like those are, it's the low hanging fruit, but in a crowded marketplace, those are the kinds of things that really do separate like the top half at least from the bottom half, right?
Sure.
Thing that kind of separates the kind of top 10% from the rest is, number two, and was in my mind really about engagement with the community. And that can take a number of forms, but I think the most successful app developers, they spend a lot of time talking to customers, engaging with customers, and like Atlassian, to its credit, provided a lot, still to this day provides a lot of different forums and opportunities to do that, whether they are in-person community groups or events like Atlassian, years ago it was called Summit. Today we call it Team. So Team 23 coming up at the end of April in Las Vegas. But, and then we also have like our online community, and not just our kind of community forums, discussion groups, but then we also have Slack communities, and we have our public issue track. You want to get an idea for what customers are asking for, and you want to make customers aware that you solved the problem. We've got a public issue and feature request tracker where you can kind of get ideas, and then that a bunch of people are looking for this feature. You can share or try to reach out and find people who might be interested in giving you more feedback on what exactly you're building. And then we built that feedback loop internally into the into the marketplace itself. So that's why it's key to have reviews and ratings and all of that stuff. It helps accelerate the speed of development for the individual apps, and produces kind of gives you a lot of the elements of like that key startup feedback loop out of the box for somebody who might not be able to scale up their own version of all of that stuff as a startup, right? No, super interesting. Great advice in there. And I've definitely seen that in my own kind of experience, and also shopping for, ecosystem apps across other platforms. And especially some of them seem, it's like, you look at the, apps, the App Store marketplace, directory listing, and it's just like, man, like, does anyone even work here? Like, they didn't even put in like the basic effort to like make this look like a real offering. So I think that's, there's definitely a lot of low hanging fruit there. I'd love to ask about, a little on the stuff you've been working on more recently, especially around like enterprise customers. I know you mentioned that, historically Atlassian kind of like served with this bottoms up motion, and a lot of like self-serve signups by, a single developer or a small team of developers would sign up and start using Jira without having to go through some big heavy duty enterprise sales motion. And I know you've kind of worked your way into, actually building like the sort of all the functionality that, big enterprises need for big wall-to-wall deployments. And I know a lot of that is like kind of in your purview now with the stuff you're working on with trust. So like what have been kind of the hairiest parts of getting that figured out, or what are kind of like the big priorities, in that camp right now? Oh man, everything. Every time you think, we got something figured out, you realize like you're really just leveling up into the next hardest problem. And we look at some of the, especially in the enterprise part of Atlassian's business, some of the companies that are kind of best in class at serving enterprises at scale, and we know that there's still a long way for us to go in our journey. Atlassian has been working and iterating on our enterprise motion for 9. We launched our data center edition for our on-premises products, and our first kind of technical advisory services and enterprise support offering back in 2013, 2014. So it's been a long journey here, but I think when we think about the most recent 4 to 5 years, as we've really focused on not just enterprise, but also helping our enterprise customers move to the SaaS version of our products, which is what I focus on. I think there's, let me break it into 3 three areas. Like one is pricing and packaging. So it takes, especially speaking, to the M's out there, I think, I joined, when it was probably one of the most interesting like learning experiences for me when I went from Jira to launching Atlassian Access. And my time when I worked on Jira, I really kind of took the entire go-to-market, which is funny because I came from a product marketing background, but like I took a lot of the go-to-market for granted. Like the customers appeared and they were using Jira, and then my job was to improve parts of how they administered the product, right? And then I took over Atlassian Access, and I realized like I had a feature a huge portion of our customer base needed and was willing to pay for, and yet wasn't getting right, and it was because the way we were positioning the product was hard to understand, and customers knew they needed the feature but didn't understand the value, and the dynamics for how they purchased it were complex and didn't map easily to what their expectations were. And our salespeople, both our high touch salespeople that were focusing on parts of the market, but even like our kind of scaled, if you have a question about a product and you reach out to Atlassian and get an answer, like they weren't well enabled in being able to sell it. So I think the first thing that we have had to really invest in is just building out a lot of those functions and improving how do we make sure that like our products are packaged in such a way and priced. And so I learned a lot about pricing strategy the last couple of years, like priced in such a way that like we're pricing for value, it's compelling and understandable, and we can get into those kind of bake-off situations and win against a competitor. Second thing is it's really easy to get lost in kind of like the highest value added features. And one of the things, near and dear to my heart, because it's what I spend a lot of my time on, is it's really important to focus on making sure all the boxes are checked for enterprise customers, but at the same time, not losing sight of the ultimate core value of our products. And that's a really tricky line to walk on. So, a lot of my team is, all right, we know that we've got customers who, in order to use a SaaS product in Canada, they have to have the data stored in Canada. And all right, like that's so we have to do a lot of work in order to make sure that like every single place that stores any data for Jira or for Confluence has, we have a storage layer up in Canada, and the customers who enable that setting, that data never leaves Canada, right? But but that's not necessarily a long-term competitive differentiator, right? And so it's like they're still buying Jira software because they need a software development tool to do agile software development. But at the same time, you can't like look past those kind of the things that get your foot in the door or even get your piece of software onto the consideration list. So at the same, I'm kind of straddling this line of helping our product teams understand like, hey, like if we don't have these boxes ticked, or we're not making companies CISO, like there's people in compliance and security and IT that are just going to reject our products outright if we don't have those certain boxes ticked. And also reminding my team, like, hey, at the end of the day, like, our customers are not buying our product because the controls on API tokens are really great. They're buying our product because it solves a business problem for them. But that doesn't mean the work we're doing isn't important. It's just, it's supporting the larger mission. And then the third biggest learning, I would say, is just tightly integrating, maturing our go-to-market motion in the enterprise to be about overall value versus total cost of ownership, right? And so, and I think this is a perennial challenge for both product and product marketing people to get really focused on the latest feature or the thing that's like, you built as like the most recent differentiator against the competitor. And it's, and it's an easy to lose sight of like the customer perspective of like, what's the overall package adding up to? What's the overall value of what I'm selling, and then how to actually quantify, especially our current position where we're talking to a lot of customers about the trade-offs of running our software on premises versus moving to a SaaS version of the products, and accurately quantifying the total cost of ownership of both those things. And
right.
We've matured our ability to talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah. That's great to hear. And yeah, you're right. There's so many, so many kind of like plates to keep in the air at the same time. And it's like important to not lose sight on one by over indexing on another.
I've gained an immense amount of respect for, I think Atlassian comes from a background of no salespeople, and I've gained an immense amount of respect for the folks that work on our account
for sure.
teams with our biggest customers. Like it is a challenging job, and frequently, and for our advocates on the customer side too. You've got, for our customers in the Fortune 500, we've got teams of folks supporting Atlassian's products within an organization, and they have 100%. Their stakeholders and their executives to manage, and they do an amazing job to sell the value of our products within their companies.
Yeah. I mean, it's as much of like an interpersonal, complexity as there is like, technical complexity with a lot of this too. And it sounds like you have a good handle on both, which is awesome to hear. Hey, I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. I feel like I just got a master class at, enterprise product management, which is awesome. I feel like I could talk about this all day. I know you have obviously important work to get back to. You just told us all about it, but appreciate the time today, and just all the generosity with your story and insights and everything you've taught us today. This has been super valuable. So thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thanks. Pleasure to meet you.
Any way folks can say hi if they want to reach out or say hello?
Oh, we were talking about this before we started recording. My name's only 9 letters long. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to get in touch.
Awesome. Will do, Dave. Thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
See ya.